great. Good to have you. It's getting to be a regular event.
I've actually got...
you got some handouts? Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we're getting quite used to this room. Yeah. Thank you both very much for being here. We've got the written submission from the Institute and now the additional notes. We've got about 15 minutes. So over to you. You know the process.
Thank you. While that's being handed out, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to present to you on the submission from the Institute on the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Bill. So our submission principally relates to clauses 44 to 46, which deal with cadastral surveying, so the definition of property boundaries and interests and easements in land. So my name is Shane Dixon. I'm a licensed cadastral surveyor under the Cadastral Survey Act 2002, and I'm also a registered professional surveyor with the Institute. I am also the chairperson of the local Canterbury branch of the Institute of Surveyors. I've been practicing as a surveyor for 18 years and the last 10 years here in Christchurch. With me today is Mark Allen, who is our elected national president of the Institute. Mark too is a licensed cadastral surveyor and registered professional surveyor. He's been practicing for close to 40 years, and 30 of those in Christchurch. So yeah, we're here today as representatives of the Institute and to speak to the Institute's submission. By way of background, the Institute is a long-standing professional membership body supporting and representing the professional interests of surveyors and spatial professionals in New Zealand. We were first established in 1888 and recently celebrated our 127th anniversary. We've currently got 16 branches in New Zealand and one in Hong Kong, with a membership in excess of 1,300 in the cadastral surveying and spatial professions. We're also an international organisation and influential to many of our overseas peers. For example, as an affiliated national body of the International Federation of Surveyors, we'll be hosting the Federation's Working Week 2016 here in Christchurch next May. The theme for that working week is recovery from disaster, and it will be reflecting on New Zealand's experience recovering from the 2011 Christchurch earthquakes. We're expecting in excess of 500 delegates to that working week, and many of those will be international from overseas. The Institute is New Zealand's leading advocacy body for professions involved in the location and measurement sciences. Most recently, the Canterbury branch, the local branch, formed a working party comprising of experienced Christchurch surveyors to advise government on property boundary definition and the challenges therein in Canterbury following the earthquakes, and in the development of the Canterbury Property Boundaries and Related Matters Bill. The Institute, our values are integrity, environmental sustainability, excellence, respect for the profession and ethical behaviour. And our purpose is to aspire to be an internationally recognised professional organisation that promotes growth, innovation, excellence and community needs for all facets of surveying and spatial science in New Zealand. For all these reasons, the Institute is ideally placed to provide you with recommendations on the appropriateness of clauses 44 to 46, which do specifically deal with cadastral surveying. We have a level of expertise that to date has not been taken advantage of in the creation of this bill or its predecessor, the ChCh Act. But our recommendations are informed and well considered in consultation with our membership. The Institute generally supports the passing of this bill and its intended purposes in particular. However, we strongly encourage the removal of clauses 44 to 46, which deal with cadastral surveying. these clauses are not only completely unnecessary, but actually pose a threat to the New Zealand cadastre. We've outlined our principal reasons for holding that view in our submission, but I'll briefly summarise them again here. So the Surveyor-General already has the authority under the Cadastral Survey Act to carry out the actions that the bill purports to grant to the Chief Executive of LINZ. So clauses 44 to 46 are not necessary to be able to approve surveys during this regeneration phase for the city. There is a risk to the integrity of the cadastre in delegating the authority to approve cadastral survey data sets to anyone other than a suitably qualified person. The Surveyor-General is the highest authority in New Zealand on survey and boundary related issues, and therefore he or she is the only person qualified to do this. And I guess in relation to that risk, we're thinking about where there may be theoretical surveys in the central business district or the CBD, for example, in relation to land boundaries and emissions in relation to easements or interests in the land, which could be both detrimental to the subject land, but even to adjoining lands as well, or in a worst case, maybe even finding a landlocked parcel of land, so, or ending up with a landlocked parcel. Yeah. So the Surveyor-General, in making decisions to utilise the exemption powers and effectively to approve surveys that don't follow the normal rules, takes a multitude of factors into account, learned through decades of experience and education in surveying. He or she is required to make their decision in a way that balances the interests of the general public and the Crown in maintaining the cadastre. In addition to those reasons that we outlined in the submission, we would now like to just outline a couple of further drivers for our position. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask away as well. So, in reading the bill, the purpose of the bill is to provide a new legal framework to support the regeneration of Greater Christchurch over the next 5 years. It is needed to recognise the shift in focus from recovery to regeneration. In addition, the objectives for the Regenerate Christchurch component include engaging and advocating effectively with communities and stakeholders, etc., and collaboratively working with others. Our stance is that the powers being granted to the Chief Executive of LINZ through clauses 44 to 46 will be in direct conflict with the purpose of the bill and the new direction it is promoting, in particular that engagement with local communities and greater collaboration. In the first and second readings for the ChCh Act in 2011, it was stated that the similar clauses proposed under that Act, and these clauses are effectively a cut and paste almost, were needed to ensure the speedy and accurate reinstatement of title boundaries, and for the Chief Executive of ChCh to be able to carry out or commission building works, including demolition, and also to enable urgent action to be taken to prevent unreasonable delays that might stop necessary work, such as demolition or temporary housing, for example. While we accept that in the recovery phase there could have been the potential for these powers to be used, for example, to allow large buildings with big drop zones to be demolished without long delays, and to enable works associated with temporary housing or the provision of essential services to be undertaken without the delay. However, in the regeneration phase, these drivers for speed no longer exist. We don't really have any major demolition still to get done. All the essential services are in place. And in relation to temporary housing, if there was a need for that going forward, the Surveyor-General still does have the powers to operate as if clauses 44 to 46 were in place. So there are still that opportunity. We also note that even during the recovery phase, when the need for speed would have been most evident, the similar powers under the ChCh Act were not used. So if those powers have not been used during the recovery phase, then what chance is there that those same similar powers will be needed during the regeneration phase? we contend that the chance is negligible. And I guess, in terms of examples, I think of I was recently, or lunch today, at the Restart Mall, and not that I was involved with that project, but I understand that when the 60-odd containers arrived at Littleton, it was all guns blazing to get them to site and to get them fused together and welded and fabricated and fitted out and painted and all that was happening, and they were being placed over numerous properties with boundaries running, zigzagging in and around. So that to me would have been a good example of when potentially it may well have been required, but again, it wasn't. We were able to get on and do it, and it's now the wonderful asset to the city that it is. Where was I up to? At the conclusion. Therefore, it is absolutely vital that for the ultimate regeneration of this city, for the continued protection of the interests of the general public and the Crown in maintaining the cadaster, our property boundaries and rights, and for the purpose and objectives of this bill to be truly met, that clauses 44 to 46 are removed. Again, we thank you for your time today, and should you have any questions, both Mark and I are happy to take them.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple of just a couple of other points just to reinforce what Shane's been talking about, and just remind the committee that the Cadastral Survey Act 2002, Section 47, Part 5, the Surveyor General has the authority to grant exemptions from the requirements of the rules. And also in Section 7, Surveyor General is essentially responsible for the setting of the rules and the standards. And in Section 9, the Chief Executive is essentially responsible for the enabling of surveys to be carried out under the rules. And so these existing provisions in the Cadastral Survey Act are really the basis for our submission, and it probably in some ways reflects a lot of the submissions that the committee has heard during the day, that we want the authority, if you like, to be returned to the people and to the existing situation. So more business as normal as opposed to being controlled from afar. But in just a general comment, and it's perhaps that, or it seems like in the drafting, that the provisions or the powers of the Chief Executive of SERA under the emergency provisions have simply been just changed to the Chief Executive of LINZ from the survey perspective. Now that's probably been done without any real consideration or opportunity to think about the consequences of that. And we're concerned that although the Regen Bill is proposed to have limited tenure, which the original SERA Act had, and therefore we could probably take some comfort that the powers of the Surveyor General had been conferred to the Chief Executive of SERA, and the same is happening here again. It's a 5-year tenure, but the powers of the Surveyor General are being transferred to the Chief Executive of LINZ. And I suppose as a surveyor, I have grave concerns about that in terms of where that might take us in the future. And as Shane has already pointed out, that we rely really heavily on the Surveyor General as a suitably qualified person to administer the cadaster in terms of the rules. Yeah. So, and I suppose as an example of that, you'll all be aware that we are currently considering the Christchurch earthquake boundary bill. And there's been lots of consultation over that, and again Shane has talked about the Working Party. You may be aware of the Sector Leaders Group, and we've put a huge amount of work into that. But I suppose the scenario could be that the Surveyor General drafts rules, the SG guidelines and rules, and the Chief Executive could overrule that after a surveyor has completed his surveys in accordance with the rules. So,
Mark, we've gone well over time, and I know that David Parker's got a question, so I don't want to...
Sorry, cut me off.
Cut you too short, but I know that David's got a question.
Yeah, it was actually related to that issue that you just raised. As I understand it, one of the issues that arises from the earthquake is that the land moved. So people think that their fence boundary or their natural boundary between them and their neighbours moved from the place where it's defined in a survey sense, and that you and your industry has been working through with the relevant authorities how we correct those boundaries to put them where people think that they should lie in practice.
That's correct. So the
And
pragmatic
that
solution.
work's just about finished?
Yeah, well,
Well,
there-
not the physically doing it on the ground, but the theory of where those boundaries are moving from and to?
The theory has manifested itself in the earthquake boundary bill, and submissions are currently open for that. I think they close on about the 14th or 15th of January.
And do you have confidence that that's going to come to an outcome that the Surveyor General and you can all live with?
Yes, I do.
So is that and is the Surveyor General being intimately involved in that?
Yes, he has. He's been part of the sector.
So is that an example of how actually leaving it to the Surveyor General is actually, it's working out?
That's correct, and also
Thanks.
it's an example how local consultation and contribution from the local community has evolved itself into a bill that's hopefully going to be acceptable.
Thank you.
Okay, look, we've well exhausted the time, but it was hard to find a break for breath. But well done, good on you. Thanks very much.